It's strange how grief can share the same breath as greed. One moment, people are crying beside a casket, and the next, they're calculating numbers behind lowered eyes. That's what I learned the day we buried Grandma Evelyn, the day love and loyalty turned into a quiet war. Before we go further, if you've ever seen how money can tear a family apart, this story is for you. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you've ever been betrayed by those who once called you family. This one's not just about loss. It's about justice, the kind Grandma believed in. The lawyer's office smelled like old paper and polished wood, a smell I've never forgotten. My mother sat in front, dressed in black lace and trembling hands that looked convincing enough for sympathy. My uncle, Victor, leaned back with his gold cufflinks glinting under the light, the kind of man who grieves with a Rolex. Aunt Miriam dabbed her eyes with a tissue she never actually wet. And me, I sat in the corner, 26, quiet, still trying to make sense of how someone so alive could now exist only in memory. The lawyer cleared his throat. Mrs. Evelyn Hartman left behind a detailed last will and testament. It appears she prepared multiple versions throughout the years, but this is her final and binding document. The room stiffened. She divides her assets as follows. To her daughter, Linda, he nodded toward my mother, $50,000. To her son, Victor, $50,000. To her daughter, Miriam, $50,000. I noticed how their eyes brightened, almost in unison. 50,000 each, enough to make them smile in grief. And finally, he continued, to her grandson, Adam Hartman. My name sliced through the room like cold air. Everyone turned to look at me. The remaining balance of her estate, $350,000, to be held in a trust, released upon full transfer within 60 days. The silence that followed was suffocating. I didn't move, didn't even blink. $350,000? I couldn't comprehend it. Grandma had mentioned helping with my graduate tuition, but this was her entire savings, her retirement, her life's work. My uncle's jaw tightened. "Excuse me," he said slowly. "That can't be right. Evelyn always said she'd keep things, even among her children." The lawyer nodded sympathetically. That was true, until she made this last amendment. 6 months before her passing, I could feel their resentment like heat on my skin. My mother's smile twitched and vanished. Aunt Miriam's tissue fell into her lap. Victor leaned forward. "Why him?" The lawyer glanced at me, then at them. Mrs. Hartman wrote, and I quote, "Because Adam never took, he only gave." The words landed like a stone dropped into still water. Ripples of disbelief moved across every face in that room. My uncle sat back, silent now. My mother crossed her arms. Nobody said congratulations. Nobody said a word. When the reading ended, I stood to leave, still dazed, still trying to understand what I'd done to deserve such faith. I'd helped Grandma with errands, fixed her roof, spent weekends reading to her when her eyesight faded, things that felt natural, not noble. She said I reminded her of Grandpa, too kind for your own good. Outside, the sun was too bright for the weight I felt. My mother caught my arm before I could leave. "You need to be careful," she said softly. "People get strange about money." I looked at her. "People like who?" She didn't answer, just smiled that brittle smile and walked away. Days turned into weeks. I waited for the call from the bank, the paperwork that would make Grandma's last gift official. But 60 days came and went, and nothing arrived. I called the lawyer. He said, "The trust was transferred to the family's joint estate account for processing, at your mother's request." My mother's request. I repeated, stunned. "That's not what the will said. It's temporary, I was told. Administrative efficiency." But something in his voice cracked. A hesitation too heavy to miss. That night, I went to my mother's house. Her porch light flickered, the same one I'd fixed years ago. She opened the door wearing a silk robe that didn't belong to her income. The living room looked different. New furniture, a rug that probably cost more than my car. "Adam," she said sweetly, "why didn't you call first? I thought maybe we should talk about Grandma's trust." Her smile faded. "Oh, that. Don't worry about it. Uncle Victor is handling the paperwork." "Handling?" I asked. You mean holding? She sighed. You're young. You don't understand how these things work. Your grandmother wanted that money to help the family. We just moved it into a safer account. My jaw clenched. Safer for who? She looked at me, something sharp in her eyes now. Don't you raise your voice at me. That money is being used responsibly. By who? I asked again, quieter this time. She didn't answer, but her silence said enough. Over the next week, I dug deeper. Every call led to another closed door, every document misplaced, every explanation too vague to be true. The $350,000 was gone. Not missing, not delayed, stolen. And it wasn't just by one of them. It was all of them. Each had taken a piece, dressed it up as a loan or reallocation. They thought I wouldn't find out. They thought Grandma's kindness ended when her pulse did. But what they didn't know, what they could never have imagined, was that Grandma's kindness was a lot like her wrath. Quiet, deliberate, and far-seeing. Because a week later, while cleaning out her old house, I found something they didn't know existed, a sealed envelope hidden beneath her sewing machine. On the front, written in her delicate handwriting, were 5 words that froze me. For Adam, if they betray you. The envelope sat in my lap for hours before I found the courage to open it. It felt heavier than paper should, as though grief itself had been folded inside. The handwriting on the front. My name written in Grandma Evelyn's careful, looping script, looked almost alive under the lamplight. I traced the letters with my thumb, remembering how she used to write grocery lists in the same cursive, how she always dotted her I's like a schoolteacher, even in her 70s. When I finally tore it open, a faint scent of lavender rose out, her scent. Inside were 3 things: a handwritten letter, a small brass key, and a photograph of my mother, uncle, and aunt, all smiling at some long-ago family gathering. There was a red circle drawn around their faces, and beneath it, a single sentence written in blue ink. If they betray you, go to the place where I kept the truth. The letter began simply, My dear Adam, if you're reading this, it means my fears came true. I always hoped love would be enough to keep this family honest, but love can be fragile when money whispers louder. Don't confront them yet. They'll twist words and make you doubt your own eyes. Instead, find the truth first. It's where your grandfather's promises still rest, the place where we kept our beginnings safe. The key will guide you. When you see the word Evelyn, remember that it wasn't just my name. It was also the password to every secret I ever protected. Love always, Grandma. I read it 3 times, each word pressing deeper into my chest. She had known. Somehow, she had seen the betrayal coming long before I did. But what did she mean by where our beginnings rest? The next morning, I drove to her old house, the one the family had listed for sale a week after a funeral. It stood silent on Maplewood Drive, half empty and waiting to be gutted by strangers. The realtor's sign leaned in the yard like a tired soldier. I unlocked the front door with the spare key I'd kept since childhood. The air inside was thick with dust and nostalgia. The faint tick of the old grandfather clock echoed through the quiet like a heartbeat refusing to quit. I wandered through each room, touching memories. The chip table where we'd played cards, the kitchen counter where she'd taught me to roll dough, the worn recliner that still held her shape. Every corner felt like her ghost was there, watching, waiting for me to understand. Then I remembered something she told me years ago. Every family has 2 histories, Adam. The one they tell, and the one they hide. The basement was where they'd hidden things. Always locked, always too cluttered for guests. The brass key from the envelope fit perfectly into the old padlock on the basement door. It turned with a reluctant click, like it hadn't been touched in decades. The smell hit me first, a blend of dust, old wood, and something faintly metallic. I descended the steps, each creak beneath my boots sounding like a warning. Down there, everything was as I remembered, stacks of boxes labeled in her handwriting. Christmas, linens, Evelyn sewing. But one stood out, E&H Finances. I knelt beside it, heart thudding, and opened the lid. Inside were old receipts, yellowed bank statements, and a leather-bound journal embossed with the initials EH. I flipped through its pages, savings logs, rent payments, grocery budgets. And then, tucked between 2 pages, I found a folded document stamped with the seal of First Continental Bank. It was dated 2 years ago, and it listed a transfer of $350,000 into an account labeled Hartman Family Cooperative Fund. The signatures at the bottom made my blood run cold. Linda Hartman, my mother; Victor Hartman, my uncle; Miriam Lawson, my aunt. No mention of me. In the margin, in Grandma's handwriting, were 5 small words. They think I didn't notice. My hands trembled. The transfer had been made long before she died. They'd stolen it while she was still alive. And she'd known. I sat on the cold concrete floor for what felt like hours, my mind racing through memories. Every argument about responsibility. Every time my mother had said, "Don't worry about the details." Every gift that suddenly seemed affordable for people who'd always cried poor. I looked around the basement, half expecting her to walk down the stairs and tell me what to do. Instead, my eyes fell on the old safe behind her sewing desk, the one she used to call the memory box. It hadn't been opened in years. The brass key from her letter fit perfectly. Inside was another envelope, this one thicker, sealed with red wax and marked with a handwritten note. If they took the money, show them what integrity costs. Inside were photocopies, dozens of them, of emails, contracts, and bank withdrawals linking my uncle's business and my mother's family foundation to the same $350,000. She had built a trail of evidence that could destroy them if I wanted to. She hadn't just written a will. She had written a plan. I spent the night rereading every document, piecing together the puzzle of her revenge. It wasn't impulsive, it was meticulous. Each letter, each date, each transfer was proof that Grandma Evelyn had seen what greed was turning her family into, and she prepared for it. But the question now was, what did she want me to do? Expose them publicly, report them to the bank, and watch them crumble? Or finish what she started quietly, letting justice unfold the way she believed in, slowly, cleanly, without spectacle? I didn't have the answer yet, but I knew one thing for sure. The next time I looked any of them in the eye, they'd know that Grandma Evelyn's last gift wasn't the money they stole. It was the truth they couldn't bury. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Grandma Evelyn's handwriting floating in the dark, those soft loops and sharp hooks, her way of speaking to me across time. I sat at the dining table, surrounded by documents and secrets, the air thick with the smell of old paper and betrayal. The lamplight made the edges of the letters glow like they were lit from within. At around 3 a.m., I found one envelope I hadn't noticed earlier. It was wedged inside the back cover of her journal, sealed with the same red wax as before. My name was written on the front, but beneath it, in smaller letters, was a second word, begin. The word sent a shiver down my spine. Inside were several folded sheets, each numbered, each handwritten in her familiar cursive. The first page began like this: Adam, if you've reached this far, then you've already seen what they've done. You've found proof of the money, and you've seen that it wasn't about need, it was about hunger, the kind that grows when you feed it too long. But before you act, I need you to understand something. This isn't only about the money. It's about history repeating itself. You see, your grandfather trusted them once too. My throat tightened as I read on. Years ago, your grandfather left me an insurance payout after his passing. Not a fortune, but enough to help. Your uncle and mother convinced me to invest it in a family venture. I believed them. That money disappeared before I could even ask where it went. They blamed bad timing. I blamed myself for trusting them. That was the first time they stole from me. This time, I wanted to see how far their hands would reach. I gave them the rope and watched what they did with it. But I left knots they couldn't untie. Every dollar they took is documented, every lie stamped and notarized. I've set things in motion. You just have to follow the trail. She had drawn a small map at the bottom, a simple sketch of a tree behind her house, and a note. Look where your grandfather built the bench. That's where the truth sleeps. By sunrise, I was standing in Grandma's backyard, the cold morning air biting my skin. The tree in her drawing was still there, The old oak by the fence, its bark carved with initials from generations. The wooden bench beneath it was half collapsed, eaten by time and termites. I knelt and brushed aside the fallen leaves. Something metallic glinted under the rotting wood. My fingers closed around it, a small tin box, sealed with tape and rust. I pried it open with my keys. Inside were more letters, this time not to me, but to them. Each envelope had a name: Linda, Victor, Miriam. They were dated 2 weeks before her death. I opened the one addressed to my mother first. It read, "Linda, I know what you've done. I know where the money went and who helped you take it. You call it family management, but theft wrapped in motherhood is still theft. You've justified your greed for years by saying you were owed something, but the truth is you never learned the difference between comfort and entitlement. This letter isn't to scold you. It's to warn you. If you continue down this road, you'll lose something no amount of money can buy: your son's respect. He's the only one who ever gave without asking. Don't make him pay for your mistakes." The next one, from my uncle Victor, was harsher. "Victor, you've always been charming enough to fool yourself. You wear confidence like armor, but I see the coward beneath it, the man who hides debt behind laughter. The money you stole won't save you from the truth I left behind. When Adam finds this, he'll have the proof he needs. Be smart for once in your life. Tell him the truth before it finds you first." And the one for Aunt Miriam, short and cold. "Miriam, you could have stopped them. Instead, you stood by and said nothing. Silence makes you guilty too." I sat under that tree for a long time, holding the letters, feeling the weight of her words pressing into my chest. She hadn't written these in anger. She'd written them with surgical precision, each sentence cutting exactly where it needed to. When I returned to the house, I realized something else. Each envelope had been sealed, but not mailed. She hadn't intended to send them. She'd wanted me to read them. She'd wanted me to see her disappointment, her resolve, and her plan. I opened her final note to me, tucked at the bottom of the box. "Adam, I couldn't protect you from them in life, but I can protect you in death. Everything they took, everything they touched, will return to where it belongs. But I want you to be patient. Don't scream for justice. Build it quietly as I did. They think inheritance is about what they receive. They'll learn it's about what they've lost. Your next step is with a lawyer. He knows what to do once you bring him my letters. Trust him. He's the only one who never took from me." Her last words before the signature read, "Make them tell on themselves." That afternoon, I drove straight to the lawyer's office with the letters in a folder. His secretary recognized me immediately and let me in without appointment. He looked older than I remembered, tired eyes, neat suit, and the kind of cautious politeness lawyers wear like armor. I handed him the envelope. "She left this for me. Said you'd know what to do." He adjusted his glasses and began to read. The further he went, the slower his breathing became. Finally, he looked up, disbelief flickering behind his calm expression. "Adam," he said quietly, "your grandmother wasn't just generous. She was brilliant." He stood, crossed the room, and pulled a small safe key from a drawer. "She left another file here, one I wasn't authorized to open until you brought me proof. I suppose this qualifies." He unlocked the safe and withdrew a sealed brown envelope. On the front, in faded black ink, were the words, "Hartman Family Contingency File." He handed it to me. "She told me that if this file ever had to see daylight, it would change everything your family thought they understood." I looked at the envelope, heavy, sealed tight, humming with the weight of final truths. I asked, "Change it how?" He smiled faintly, a weary smile. "Let's just say, Evelyn Hartman was not the kind of woman you could steal from twice." The lawyer's office fell into the kind of silence that feels alive, breathing, waiting, thick with the gravity of something irreversible. The sealed brown envelope sat on the desk between us, edges crisp despite the years. My name wasn't on it. That somehow made it worse. It wasn't addressed to anyone. It just existed, like a ticking clock left in plain sight. He slid it toward me. "You should open it." The seal broke with a dry snap. Inside were several folders, a flash drive, and a handwritten note. The same careful script I'd come to know by heart. "Adam, If you're reading this, you've already found what they took. But what they don't know is that I let them. When they convinced me to open the family fund, I agreed on paper. But I built a second account under a mirror title. Every transfer they made, every cent they thought they were siphoning, went somewhere else first. They weren't stealing from me. They were filling my second pot. I named it the Evelyn Fund. The lawyer knows. The bank knows. And now, so do you. Let them enjoy their victory a little while longer. They believe they've inherited wealth, but what they've truly inherited are the consequences. Every signature they forge ties them legally to theft and tax fraud. You don't need to destroy them. The truth will. The flash drive contains proof of every transaction, along with letters I drafted for the authorities. But the decision is yours. You can expose them or forgive them. Just know, either way, the estate's real inheritance is waiting. I left it somewhere they'd never think to look, in plain sight. Your next step is in the safety deposit box. The key is under the photo of me and your grandfather, the one in the locket I left for you. The note ended with a single line written in darker ink. Justice, my dear boy, doesn't always raise its voice. I stare at the letter for a long time, my pulse slowing, my mind racing. The lawyer leaned back in his chair, studying me carefully. She told you about the second account? He asked. I nodded. The Evelyn Fund. He smiled faintly. I suspected as much. She created it through 3 shell accounts. On the surface, it looked like a charity trust for senior housing. But in reality, it was her personal failsafe. She had a knack for building mazes only she could navigate. I looked down at the flash drive, the cold piece of metal reflecting the office lights. And the authorities? She never filed the letters, he said. She wanted you to have that choice. Said revenge is wasted on people who can't sleep at night anyway. For the first time in weeks, I felt something like awe instead of anger. Grandma Evelyn hadn't been fooled. She'd orchestrated an entire lesson, and I was the one holding the last chord. That afternoon, I drove home through steady rain, her words echoing in my head. I let them. The realization hit me harder the more I thought about it. She'd baited her own children, not out of cruelty, but out of clarity. She'd known that truth means nothing to those who never face consequences, so she'd built those consequences herself. At home, I dug through the small box of jewelry she'd left me. Her locket was there, tarnished but intact. Inside was the photo of her and my grandfather, their faces soft with laughter, his arm wrapped around her shoulder like love itself was something to guard. I pried the photo gently from its frame. Beneath it, taped flat against the metal, was the smallest silver key I'd ever seen. The number etched into its side, Box 117B, matched the logo of First Continental Bank. The next morning, I walked into that bank with a sense of purpose that scared me a little. The clerk, an older woman with kind eyes, smiled when she saw the key. 117B, she said. Mrs. Hartman was one of our longest clients. She told me once she hoped her grandson would come for this someday. My throat tightened. She said that. The woman nodded and guided me to a private viewing room. Take your time. Inside the safety deposit box was a single velvet pouch and a folder stamped confidential. The pouch contained an old gold ring, my grandfather's wedding band, and a USB labeled EH Legal Archive. The folder was full of documents, all notarized and signed by my grandmother, transferring ownership of the Hartman family home, the adjoining land, and a 40% stake in Victor's company, to me. I froze. The air in that little room felt too thin. She hadn't just protected me. She'd quietly restructured the entire family's future. Every asset they believed was still in their names was legally tethered to her philanthropic estate, the one I now controlled. And the final line in her addendum said it plainly. Upon my passing, all holdings within the Evelyn Fund shall revert to Adam Hartman as sole executor, to distribute as he deems fit. If my children have acted in good faith, he will bless them. If not, he will teach them. I sat back, the papers trembling in my hands. She hadn't left me money. She'd left me power. That evening, I drove back to my mother's house. The lights were on, the blinds drawn. Through the window, I saw the same expensive furniture, the same comfort bought with betrayal. I stood on the porch for a long time, listening to the faint laughter inside, her Uncle Victor and Aunt Miriam together again, probably talking about me. I didn't knock. I didn't want a confrontation. Not yet. I just wanted them to wonder. The next day, I sent each of them a single envelope, hand-delivered through the lawyer. No return address. No message inside except a photograph. It was a picture of Grandma Evelyn, taken years ago, standing proudly beside the oak tree in her yard, the one where I'd found her buried letters. On the back, in her handwriting, was the line she'd once told me as a child. The truth always finds its heir. Within 24 hours, the phone call started. My mother first, her voice trembling. "Adam, what are you doing?" Then Victor, furious. "You're not seriously trying to undo everything. You'll destroy us all." And finally, Miriam, whispering through tears. She knew, didn't she? She knew what we did. I said the same thing to each of them, calmly, evenly. Grandma knew everything. And now so do I. Then I hung up. That night, I opened Grandma's flash drive. The files were organized in neat folders, one labeled to the IRS, another to the press, and a third simply called Adam. I opened the last one. Inside was a single document, just 2 paragraphs. "You don't owe them vengeance, my boy. You owe them truth. Don't let bitterness turn you into what they became. Justice is not payback, it's balance. And sometimes balance looks like silence." I read it 3 times before closing my laptop. She'd set the board, placed every piece, and left me to decide how the game ended. And in that quiet house, under the hum of the rain against the window, I made my choice. It wouldn't be revenge. Not why E.T. to I.T. would be revelation. Because Grandma didn't raise a victim, she raised a mirror. And soon, they'd be forced to look into it. The first time Grandma Evelyn ever told me about honesty, I was 9 years old. I'd broken a vase and lied about it, blaming the cat. She didn't scold me, didn't even raise her voice. She just sat me down, poured 2 cups of tea, and said, "Adam, truth has a strange way of waiting for the right echo. Sooner or later, it calls your name." Now, sitting alone with her flash drive open and my family's empire of deceit spread across my laptop, I understood what she meant. The truth wasn't a weapon, it was an invitation. And the echo was about to start calling their names, one by one. I began by tracing every transfer in the file she'd left. Each account linked to another like a chain of ghosts, forged documents, fake donations, money routed through shell companies under my uncle's name. But Grandma had been clever. She hadn't just copied the data, she'd verified it. Each record came with notarized timestamps and witness letters from her bank manager, her accountant, even her attorney. It was airtight, a net woven so tightly that no lie could slip through. Still, she hadn't sent this evidence to anyone. She'd waited. She wanted me to finish what she'd started. I spent 3 nights going through the files, memorizing every number, every date. By the 4th night, I had what I needed, a full map of how $350,000 had vanished, and how much more they'd quietly siphoned from other estate accounts over the years. The total wasn't just $350,000. It was nearly $500,000. She'd known they'd do it again, and she'd built her counterattack not out of rage, but mathematics. The first move was quiet. I logged into the Evelyn Fund, using the credentials on her notes. The login prompt accepted the password, Evelyn 1952. The dashboard opened, a simple interface, labeled Beneficiary Allocation Program. Her description in the files had been accurate. She'd mirrored every transaction the family made. But here was the twist. The account hadn't just mirrored it. It had matched it. Every dollar they took had been duplicated and placed into the fund in my name. The $350,000 wasn't gone. It had doubled. I sat there, staring at the balance. $702,811.43. There was a message waiting in the Notifications tab, timestamped 3 days before her death. To my bank manager, release full access to my grandson Adam Hartman upon my passing. If my children ask questions, refer them to the integrity clause in my estate documents. They'll know what it means. I didn't at first, but the lawyer explained it the next day. The integrity clause, he said, is an automatic condition she added to her will after your grandfather's death. It stipulates that any family member proven to have tampered with, diverted, or contested the estate forfeits all inheritance rights. And since we now have written proof, they move the trust funds. They lose everything, I said quietly. He nodded. Everything. That same evening, I invited them all to Grandma's house, or what was left of it. It had been empty since her death, the kind of emptiness that still remembers laughter. I told them I wanted a family talk. When they arrived, the air was thick with suspicion. My mother came first, dressed too nicely for an abandoned house. Uncle Victor followed, wearing his usual cologne and overconfidence. Aunt Miriam lingered behind, eyes darting, guilt written in every twitch. Adam, my mother said with forced calm, this isn't the time for theatrics. Then sit, I said. Let's make it quick. They exchanged looks but obeyed. I placed my laptop on the table, opened the folder titled The Evelyn Fund, and turned the screen toward them. Do you recognize these? I asked, scrolling through the documents, their signatures, their bank transfers, their loans. My uncle's face drained of color. Where did you get this? Grandma, I said. She left it all for me. My mother frowned. This is private. It was I cut in until you made it criminal. Miriam's hand shook. She planned this? She planned everything, I said. She knew you'd take it. She knew you'd justify it. She even knew you'd sit here right now, pretending it was a misunderstanding. Victor slammed his hand on the table. You think you can blackmail us? That money wasn't yours, I finished. It never was. And now it's evidence. I slid a folder across the table. Copies of every fraudulent signature, every falsified report. I could send this to the authorities tomorrow. But I'm not here for that. I'm here to give you a choice. They stared, silent. You can admit what you did, I continued, sign the forfeiture documents, and walk away quietly. No charges. No headloans. Or you can drag this into court, and I'll make sure Grandma's name is the last one you ever see in print. Victor scoffed. You don't have the guts. I looked him in the eye. Try me. The silence that followed was almost sacred. The kind of silence that carries the weight of truth too heavy to escape. My mother broke first. What happens to us if we sign? You lose everything Grandma left you, I said. Every cent, every asset. But you keep your freedom. She closed her eyes. And if we don't? I leaned forward. Then I keep both. By the end of the week, the signatures were done. The forfeitures filed. The estate lawyer confirmed what I already knew. The Hartman property, Victor's company shares, and the remaining trust funds were now fully transferred under my name. The story could have ended there, with revenge wrapped neatly in legal ribbons. But Grandma wasn't done yet. A few days later, the lawyer called me again. There's one last envelope, he said. She marked it for closure. You should come in. Inside that final envelope was a single photograph, an old picture of her and my grandfather standing in front of a half-built house. On the back, she'd written, "This was our first home. It's yours now. But don't sell it. Finish it. Make it what we never could. That's your real inheritance." And beneath the photo, folded in a slip of paper, was the deed. The property sat on the edge of town, the very land my uncle had once tried to claim as his. I drove there the next morning. The house was barely a skeleton, beams, frame, a roof half collapsed, windows boarded up. But it was peaceful. The morning light cut through the gaps in the walls, and the wind whispered through the tall grass. As I stood in the doorway, I could almost hear her voice again. Truth doesn't destroy, Adam. It rebuilds. That day, I decided I wouldn't sell it. I'd rebuild it, room by room, just like she wanted. But not for me. For her. For what she'd stood for. For the proof that sometimes the quietest people leave behind the loudest justice. The news spread through the Hartman family faster than I expected. It started with whispers, murmurs of confusion, disbelief, and denial. By the end of the week, it had grown into a full-blown civil war. The three of them, my mother, Victor and Miriam, no longer spoke to each other except through clenched teeth and lawyers. Grandma's final lesson wasn't just about inheritance. It was about exposure. She'd known that once the truth surfaced, their masks would turn on each other like knives. Victor was the first to crack. His company, a small construction firm, began receiving audit notices. Grandma had documented his creative accounting in painful detail, and the integrity clause I'd invoked forced an investigation. The same banks that once called him Mr. Hartman now called for explanations. His office froze half his accounts within a week. He called me, of course. His voice sounded different this time, thinner, worn down. "Adam, we can fix this," he said. "You don't have to let it go this far." "I didn't let it go anywhere," I told him. "You did. You're destroying your own family," he snapped. I almost laughed. "You destroyed it the moment you thought Grandma's love came with a price tag." He tried to say more, but I hung up. Aunt Miriam went next. Her husband filed for divorce within a month after he learned she'd forged tax documents using his company's credentials to help Victor move Grandma's money. The story leaked into local gossip circles. People who once attended their dinner parties now avoided them. The fall from grace was slow and public, the kind that eats away at dignity one whisper at a time. My mother, though she fought the hardest, she still called every few days, alternating between begging and guilt-tripping. "Adam, I did what I thought was best," she'd say. "I didn't steal from you. I was protecting the family." By lying, I'd ask. By managing, she'd insist, voice rising. "You wouldn't understand. You've never had to handle responsibility." Responsibility. That word felt like poison in her mouth. She said it like greed had ever been a form of guardianship. One evening, I found her waiting on the porch of Grandma's unfinished house. She must have followed me there. The sky was painted in dusk, that half-light where faces hide more than they show. "Adam," she said softly, "this place, she left it for all of us, didn't she?" "No," I said, unlocking the door. "She left it to the one person who didn't sell her memory." She flinched. "I made mistakes, but I'm still your mother." "I know," I said. "And that's the only reason you're still free." Her eyes filled. "You don't mean that." "I mean every word," I said quietly. "I have the power to bury all of you legally, Mom. But I won't, because I refuse to become what you turned into." She stepped closer. "Then what do you want from me?" I looked at her, the woman who'd once been my anchor, now reduced to a ghost of desperation. "I want honesty. For once in your life." She didn't answer. Instead, she looked away, at the horizon where the last traces of sun were fading. "She always loved you more," she whispered. I sighed. "No, she just loved you enough to hope you'd stop hurting yourself. But you never did." She turned to leave, but before she did, she said something I didn't expect. "You sound just like her, you know. Calm when you should be angry." I smiled sadly. That's because she taught me anger burns, but truth rebuilds. The fallout continued. The community that once held the Hartman name with respect now avoided it entirely. Every rumor, every revelation peeled another layer from their pride. And though I didn't release the evidence publicly, Grandma's contingency had a way of surfacing the truth without my help. The IRS investigation into Victor's company became public record. So did the forfeiture filings. The family's secrets became their introductions. The irony was poetic. The people who spent their lives chasing status now couldn't buy silence. A few weeks later, the lawyer called again. "You might want to come in," he said. "There's something you should see." When I arrived, he handed me an envelope. "This came through the court," he said. "Probate closure documents. There's an annotation attached from your grandmother's estate executor." I opened it. Inside was a short note written by the executor on her behalf. One last echo of her voice. "When the family fractures, let time be the glue, not money. If Adam chooses peace, return to him the Evelyn Fund in full. If he chooses revenge, donate it to charity. Either way, my legacy will never sit in greed again." The lawyer smiled faintly. "She left you with the final word. What happens if I keep it?" I asked. He shrugged. "Then you decide what the Hartman name means from now on." That night, I drove to Grandma's old home. the one they'd once tried to sell. I stood beneath the oak tree, the same one where I'd found her letters, and looked up at the stars through its branches. The world was quiet again, almost gentle. I thought about the house she wanted me to rebuild, the inheritance sitting untouched in that account, the family I'd lost, and the one I still carried in my chest. I opened my phone, logged into the bank portal, and stared at the balance. $700,000. Every cent of greed turned into proof of her brilliance. Then I transferred half of it to the local senior housing charity, the same one she'd volunteered at every Sunday for 20 years. The confirmation pinged, soft and final. I whispered, "You win, Grandma." A week later, I received a letter. No return address, no signature, just a single sentence written in familiar handwriting. "Now you understand, my boy. Revenge that heals is the only kind worth having." I stared at it for a long time, then folded it carefully and slipped it into the wall of the unfinished house, right between the beams. It belonged there, hidden, enduring, part of the foundation. The last winter before Grandma passed, she made me promise something I didn't understand at the time. We were sitting on her porch, watching the first snow dust the fields. She looked at me and said, "When I'm gone, don't guard what I've left, grow it. Let the lesson live longer than the hurt." I thought she meant money. I was wrong. It had been 6 months since the reckoning. The Hartman family name had changed, not legally, but in reputation. No more dinner invitations. No more photos in local business magazines. My mother moved to a smaller town, away from the gossip she'd sown. Victor sold what was left of his company and vanished somewhere down south. Aunt Miriam volunteered at a community center, her hands always trembling when she spoke my name. I hadn't seen any of them since the day they signed the forfeiture papers. I didn't need to. Some distances heal better in silence. The unfinished house still stood at the edge of town, the skeleton Grandma and Grandpa once dreamed of making a home. I visited it every week, bringing small things, a lamp, a chair, sometimes a bag of nails. It wasn't much, but it was something to build on. That spring, I finally started the reconstruction. Not for profit, not to erase the past, but because she'd asked me to finish it. Each wall I raised, I thought of her tea-scented hugs, her half-smile when she outsmarted a problem, her unshakable calm when others turned bitter. I built it the way she would have wanted, slow, intentional, steady. And as the walls grew higher, the noise in my heart began to quiet. One morning, while sorting through her final belongings stored in the attic of her old home, I found a weathered shoebox I hadn't noticed before. Inside were faded photographs, receipts, and a small, sealed note with my name. It read, "My dear boy, by now the dust has settled. If you're still standing, it means you chose the right kind of victory, the kind that doesn't cost your soul. What you've built will last longer than the anger that once built it. But I left you one more thing. Something you can't spend, can't transfer, and can't lose. Go to the old tree, our oak. Beneath the roots, you'll find what truth looks like when it blooms. The oak, the same one where I'd first found her hidden letters. I drove there as the sun dipped low, painting the sky gold. The ground was soft from recent rain. I knelt, pressing my hands into the damp soil, and dug where her message had led me. The shovel struck something hard. A small wooden box, sealed but not locked. Inside, wrapped in an old handkerchief, was a simple object, a locket identical to the one she'd given me before, but with a different engraving. On the inside were 2 words carved with steady hands. Keep going. There was also a folded letter, yellowed and creased from years of waiting. Adam, you've seen what greed can do. Now I want you to see what grace can build. You carry our family's future now, not in wealth, but in wisdom. The land, the house, the fund, they are tools, not trophies. Use them to help people who remind you of me, the ones who gave even when they had nothing left. That's the inheritance they'll never understand. That's what it means to rebuild from ruins. Tears fell before I realized it. For months I had carried her justice like armor, but this letter stripped it all away, leaving only gratitude. A year later, the house stood complete. Sunlight poured through its tall windows, spilling over the polished floors like blessings. The first people to walk through its doors weren't family. They were strangers. A group of elderly tenants who'd lost their housing due to rising costs. The sign out front read, "The Evelyn House, a place to rest and begin again." Every plaque, every room bore her touch, and though her chair in the corner sat empty, I swear sometimes I could still hear the faint sound of her humming through the halls. A few months after the grand opening, I got a letter in the mail. Handwritten and signed, but I knew the penmanship instantly. It was my mother's. "Adam, I visited the house today. It's beautiful. She'd be proud of you. I don't deserve forgiveness, but I wanted to thank you for giving her memory back its dignity." For the first time in years, I didn't feel the sharpness of her name. Just sadness, the kind that feels like healing when it finally stops bleeding. On the 1-year anniversary of finishing the house, I stood beneath the oak tree again. The wind carried the scent of rain and lilac, her favorites. I whispered, "It's done, Grandma. It's all done." And I swear, for a fleeting second, the leaves rustled like applause. Thank you for listening to Grandma's story. A story of truth, patience, and quiet justice. If this story touched you, make sure to like, comment, and share it so others can hear it too. And don't forget to subscribe for more emotional family stories like this one. Stories that remind us that sometimes love's truest form is discipline, and the softest voices leave the loudest legacies.